Hello. This video is one in a series that talks about how to create custom operating systems using the PCM Tech editor. This video is going to be about creating a FlexFuel Multitune custom operating system. This type of custom operating system has some quirks of its own, and that's why it's getting its own video. To get started, we start in the PCM Tech editor main screen. Go to Calibration Tools and select FMT Custom OS Configuration. Once this loads, you'll see we have a gray screen and we can't do anything except open a file or create a file or load a file. I'm going to open a file that's unlicensed. Once this file is open, you see that I don't currently have it licensed. Now, I have another file that has been licensed for flashing and for custom operating system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Merge License Info. So I'm going to select my tune licensed. This is a tune that I have licensed to my car and for the custom operating system. And as you can see what that did, now the file says it's licensed. All of the tune slots and all of the settings have populated. Now that we have the tune loaded and licensed, I'm going to go over the settings and how to configure a multi-tune with FlexFuel. Doing multi-tune with FlexFuel adds what looks like a little bit of complication on top of putting all the parameters in the different tables and making the FlexFuel work. But once you've seen what it does and why it does it, and you've had a chance to play with it a little bit, you'll see that it's not really that daunting. But I'm going to start with the settings. So we're making a FlexFuel tune with the user FlexFuel select. You can do the CAN FlexFuel that PCM Tech supports as well if you have that sensor. I don't, so I'm just going to do the user FlexFuel select. I want tune and fuel memory. I'm going to leave the launch tune in tunes 1 through 4. No brake pedal interlock, because I want the launch tune to work while I'm rolling, not from a stop. But the brake pedal interlock allows you to configure it so it can work with the brake pedal as well. I do want variable launch RPM, and then I have a US market car, so I'm going to pick a US dash. So when you configure the multi-tune and the FlexFuel, every parameter that you add to your launch tune and the other tune slots is also going to get added to your alternative fuel overlay. It's going to make it look kind of busy, and depending on how many parameters you've added, it can be, but it's doing it for a reason because of how it has to layer the different parameters on top of each other, and then one tune builds on top of that when you switch tunes or when it's blending for FlexFuel. It's going to add the tables, and it might seem daunting, but don't worry, it's not too bad. I'm going to start by creating my launch tune. I'm just going to throw cylinder pressure limit in there so I can take a little bit of spark out, make it so it doesn't rely quite as much on the throttle to limit my RPM for my rolling launch tune. And again, as you can see, it added it down over here, but we'll talk about that when we get back out to the main editor. Tune 2, I like to make pops and bangs. If you've seen my multi-tune creation video, I'm going to make the exact same thing. And for this one, I'm just going to import my pops and bangs template. So brought those in and it loaded them up over here. Next, tune 3, we're going to do the valet tune again. I'm just going to add a load limit. So I'm going to bring up my load limit table. This is going to allow it to not get into boost. We're going to add that to tune 3. And then I'm going to add a ghost cam tune that I exported earlier. And I'm going to select values so it imports the values. So Ghost Cam 1, that's my Ghost Cam settings. And I know that it works on my car, so we're just going to import that. It adds all the tables. And again, it adds all the tables over here. Finally, I'm going to add my FlexFuel tables. I'm going to make a really simple FlexFuel that is the absolute bare minimum that you might need to make this work. So I'm going to add my borderline lambda modifier. I'm going to add some cranking fuel. I'm also going to add my MBT spark tables. So everything's added, and we've changed all our settings. Click Build and Save Custom OS. It's going to do its thing and bring up a save dialog box. I'm going to add multi-flex on this one. So when we get back out to the main editor, you're going to see that there's 3 new sets of parameters in the navigator. The custom OS system config, the config tables for flex fuel and dual maps, and the custom OS tables for flex fuel and Multitune. You can configure the basics of some cluster information, some settings that you can change inside the custom OS configurator, but we don't need to change anything in there. The next one is your custom OS configuration tables for flex fuel. Since in the United States, for the most part, you don't get lower than 10% ethanol, so I'm just going to change my lowest value to be 10%. And again, if you saw my other videos about map usage, you'll know that high map being a 1, that's your E85 maps, and then a 0, that's your base fuel, your 93, 98 maps. And finally, one other thing that's critical for flex fuel is the switch point for scalars. None of your HDFX tables and no scalars blend. PCM Tech has created a stoichiometric air-fuel ratio scalar specific to their flex fuel implementation that can blend behind the scenes. That's why you don't need to add the stoichiometric air-fuel ratio scalar. And all of those switch based on this value. So when your ethanol content hits whatever you configure this to, you could set this to 60% or whatever you need for your setup. So all of your scalars, any HDFX tables that you've added are going to switch over to your E85 tables at that value. Now on to the part that's going to look very daunting. You've got your tunes for base fuel, and you've got your tunes for E85. And we have our launch tune, which is the cylinder pressure, and you can see that it exists twice. It's like that in case you've added parameters to one of your tune slots that needs to be changed on E85 or on your base fuel. So say on my launch tune for base fuel, I wanted to limit spark to a certain value when I'm launching. I can change my base fuel to 10 degrees, for example. But say I wanted it a little bit different on E85 for whatever reason. I can change it to 12 degrees. So now, as your fuel blends from your base fuel, your 93, 98 octane, to your E85, your launch tune slot cylinder pressure limit is also going to blend based on the fuel. That's why these exist in 2 different locations. And the same is true, we're going to ignore tune 1 for right now. The same is true for the rest of your tunes. They all have 2 sets of values so that if you need to change them to make them work on your alternate fuel, you have the ability to do that, and it will blend between them, or will switch between the scalars wherever it needs to, wherever you have it configured. So now we're going to look at Tune 1. Tune 1, when you open it, you're going to see that it has imported every single parameter for all of your tune slots and your flex fuel parameters. It did it for base fuel, and it did it for E85. The parameters that were added for your alternate tune slots, it will have pulled the values from your base tune into both your base fuel and your E85 tune slot. It does that so it has the ability to fall back onto something for either fuel type if it needs it. If those values don't need to be changed for either fuel type, you can leave them alone. Any parameter that you added to one of the multi-tune slots that now also lives in the base tune slot for 98 and E85, if the value doesn't need to be changed based on the fuel type, you can leave it alone and you can ignore it. I added the HDFX table for optimal stability. I don't need to change that for the fuel type, for example. So I can leave that the same for both fuel types. I don't have to do anything about it. The only reason I imported this table is so I could have the pops and bangs on Tune 2. I can leave it alone and not touch it. So any parameter that doesn't need to be changed based on fuel type in the base tune that got pulled in because it's in one of your other tunes, you can leave it alone. So then you can go in and make all your changes for your flex fuel. So I would change my MBT spark and change my borderline lambda spark modifier and any other values that I need to change for flex fuel. The specifics of making the flex fuel values work is outside the scope of this video. This video is so you can see how to put the parameters in your multi-tune slots and your alternative fuel slot, what it looks like in the editor, and why it looks the way it does in the editor. Thanks for watching.